Honorable Minister, Secretary of Defense, Chief of Defense Staff, Commanders of the Army, Navy and Air Force, officers and members of the Armed Forces of Sri Lanka, graduates of the Defense Services Command and Staff College, and distinguished guests. I was happy to accept this invitation to be the chief guest at the graduation ceremony of the Defense Services Command and Staff College. This is the first time I'll be formally addressing members of the armed forces after being appointed Prime Minister following the presidential elections of November 16. It was my singular privilege to have been the Commander-in-Chief of the Sri Lankan Armed Forces at the time of its greatest achievement in defeating LTT terrorism 10 years ago. This is an achievement that will lie to the credit of the Sri Lankan Armed Forces, not only locally, but internationally as well, for decades to come. We achieved this victory at a time when the entire world was floundering without being able to prevail conclusively over terrorism. The Sri Lankan achievement was thus a beacon of light to the entire world and not just to Sri Lanka. It should be remembered that the LTT was officially designated as the deadliest terrorist organization in the world in January 2008 by the FBI. Even in a situation where they did not pose a direct threat to the USA. The organizations like Al-Qaeda, which did pose direct threat to the USA, were ranked lower than the LTT by the Americans. That in itself gives a measure of the terrorist organization that we were faced with. Yet we defeated this terrorist organization conclusively in 2009. Until we actually defeated them, very few people thought that was possible. Some foreign officials and representatives who met me at that time told me not to try to do the impossible. The lessons that we all have to learn from our own past is that nothing will be possible unless you have confidence in yourself and are willing to take risks. After I took office as president in 2005, I appointed the best person I knew for the job to the position of Defense Secretary, and on his recommendations, appointed other suitable officers and put in place the military machine that won the war. Today, that Defense Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa is your president and Commander-in-Chief, elected by the people with an overwhelming mandate. We once again assume leadership of this nation at a time when our national sovereignty and national security is under threat. With just days to go to the 10th anniversary of the victory against the LTT, we had the Easter Sunday's suicide bombings carried by an extremist organization. In comparison to the most countries in Asia, we are a small island nation. But nothing seems to happen here on a small scale. In the late 1980s, the Sri Lankan was the most intense of conflict in the world, with violent uprising in the north as well as the south. Then we had the world's deadliest terrorists with the capacity to carry out full-scale ground operations and attacks by sea and air as well. This year, we had the Easter Sunday bombings, which was the deadliest terrorist attack on civilian targets to take place anywhere in Asia. Even though this is a small country, the challenges that we have had to face are not small at all. We have to take serious note of the fact that while there were no Indians among the 2008 Mumbai attackers, all the Easter Sunday suicide bombers were Sri Lankans. This is a threat that will have to be contained, not only for Sri Lanka's sake, but for the well-being of all other nations in the region. This year, India went on alert on at least 2 occasions due to the information that terrorists from Sri Lanka were trying to enter India by boats. If we don't get on top of the situation all, neighboring countries including India, the Maldives, Bangladesh, and even countries further off like Myanmar and Thailand and Malaysia will be under threat. So this new terrorist threat will have to be contained by whatever means necessary. Countries in our immediate neighborhood and beyond are well aware of the danger, and we can expect their fullest cooperation in this regard. Unlike the war against LTT, which required ground, sea, and air operations, this new threat at this stage requires mainly intelligence operations. Unfortunately, over the past 5 years, the intelligence services were rendered completely inoperative. Members of the intelligence services were persecuted, harassed, and jailed by the previous government on false charges. It was not just the intelligence services that had to face this situation. The entire high command of the armed forces during the war against the LTT was brought before the police, with a great deal of media publicity, to answer to all kinds of allegations. The wartime defense secretary, 2 chiefs of defense staff, 2 army commanders, 4 commanders of the Navy, 2 Air Force commanders, the Chief of National Intelligence, and very senior officers of the Army, Police, STF, and Navy were among those who were humiliated in this manner. Some were even taken to courts and remanded for periods of ranging from a few weeks to over 1 year. The idea was to create the impression in the minds of Sri Lankans and the international community that our armed forces were not war heroes, but thieves and murderers. No government of any country in the world has humiliated its own armed forces in this manner. The armed forces are the protectors of the nation. The change of government of January 2015 was almost as if a hostile foreign force had invaded and taken over Sri Lanka. A comprehensive program was launched and harasses and demoralize the armed forces to intimidate the Maha Sangha and the cow the majority community into submission and to obtain through dirty politics that could not be obtained through nearly 4 decades of the civil war. All of you are aware of the manner in which the previous government went to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva and co-sponsored a resolution against Sri Lanka, pledging, among other things, to institute war crimes trial against members of the armed forces with the participation of foreign judges and prosecutors. That was done by a Sri Lankan government elected by the people. Today, the people of this country have elected a president with an overwhelming mandate to rectify the injustice of the past 5 years. I take this opportunity to pledge before the armed forces of Sri Lanka that the humiliation and injustice that they were subjected over the past 5 years will be rectified and restitution provided where necessary. Initiatives will be taken at the international level of restore to our armed forces the respect and dignity they deserve. We all know that there are various agendas at the international level operational with regard to our armed forces. There are instances where certain foreign parties objected to promotions made within our armed forces. No sovereign country will allow such foreign interference in the internal affairs of its armed forces. We have been elected to power to safeguard the national sovereignty and national security of Sri Lanka, and we will do whatever it takes to achieve that objective. Overcoming the challenges that we were confronted with in the form of the LTT required military hardware and pitched battles with a terrorist army. The new situation that we are faced with requires intelligence, operations, cooperation with international intelligence agencies and certain strategic foreign policy initiatives. We, the political authorities, will provide the armed forces of Sri Lanka with the leadership to achieve the objective of ensuring the national security of a sovereign Sri Lankan. That is our pledge to the armed forces and the people of Sri Lanka. I wish all those graduating from the Defence Services Command and Staff College this year every success in your future services to this nation. You must all bear in mind your responsibilities as members of the illustrious military organization that did what was thought impossible and amazed the entire world. There are several officers from friendly countries among those graduating, and I wish you to every success in your services to your respective nations. Thank you.